No two ways about it. The Denver Broncos at practice today, not a good day for the offense. Sloppy performance. The defense, obviously, we know is obviously a strong one and one of the league's best, but it doesn't necessarily excuse the disappointing performance by the offense today. Sean Drotar, Nate Lundy coming to you from Downhill Brewing on Arapahoe Road. It's not a surprise, Nate, that the Broncos defense is getting the better of the offense. Actually, at this point in camp, it's not surprised when any team's defense is getting the better of its offense this early in the process. But today for the offense, not a lot of room to run.
Nope.
Sloppy in the passing game. There wasn't really a lot to like offensively. The Broncos went longer than they expected. There were certain things Sean Payton wanted to see, and it's nothing to, we're talking about not Allen Iverson this thing, but we're talking about practice. Let's not go overboard. But it wasn't the strongest day for the Orange and Blues offense.
No, not at all. It wasn't. And that's, that's happened a couple of times here over the course of the first week and some change that they've had practice. But yeah, the defense looked like what the defense usually looks like. I will also say this. I think there are some things that are being installed. I think there's some different things that the offense is doing that is leading to some of it. But you talked about the fact that practice went a little bit long. Sean Payton talked for like 7 hours at the podium. I mean, he might still be talking, to be honest with you. I mean, he just kept going and going and going and going and going. And sometimes that happens when you're frustrated as a coach, right? I mean, you can talk about this happened and all of that. But I will say a couple of things about practice today. One of the things that happened, this is the first day that they've had officials there. Okay. So, excuse me. And some of
they were there yesterday. Because they were going over a lot of the pre-snap, the pre-snap rules. I like to call them those the Jawan Taylor rules.
Yeah, exactly.
Over at Kansas City.
But today, like for example, I think that at one point the offense ran 4 plays and they had 3 pre-snap penalties in terms of a false start, motion, illegal formation, you name it. They were having some issues on the offensive side of things, and our friend Zach Bai actually asked Sean Payton about that. When he was at the podium, and Sean basically said, look, we're happy to have the officials out here. And he said, I've told the guys, it made me laugh actually, because at one point Sean Payton said, I don't want the guys arguing with the officials because I've never actually seen that be successful. He said, but what we do need to be doing is figuring out what did they see. He said, I don't want these guys arguing with the officials about whether or not they were or weren't guilty of the penalty. He said, what I want them to be doing is going over to the official and saying, what did I do? What did you see me do? So that becomes what's in the back of their mind. He didn't want them worried about, arguing about flags or whether something was or wasn't pass interference. There was a hilarious exchange between Cortland Sutton and one of the officials that happened right in front of us right before practice ended. And Sean Payton talked about that in answering the questions, but he also said, I would rather be making these mistakes right now and figuring out what we're doing than wind up making these exact same mistakes later on during the regular season.
Sure. I mean, that's the idea of having the officials out there, quite frankly. Obviously, the NFL, it's kind of funny because, baseball changes the slightest rule, a little bitty tweak, people just freak out about it, thinking it's going to totally alter the game. The NFL changes like 5 or 6 rules a year. Yes. Every year. The kickoff's been changed again, moving an extra 5 yards. We heard Marvin Mims talk about that. We know about the changes to illegal formation. Again, like the Jawan Taylor rule, go watch all the times in Kansas City that got flagged. They got sick of it. So it really is great to have the officials out there, because not only do you get informed in the rule changes and you get informed to get used to them early, but they do actually also kind of call your scrimmage moments, your 7-on-7s, and it keeps you from getting bad habits, especially on the defensive side. We saw a couple times in which there would have been holding in the end zone. They threw the flags.
Yes.
It's all good to have the refs there. There's really no downside to it. And Sean Payton's right. Part of it is, look, get used to it. You're not going to argue with them. You're never going to win. Just learn about what they're calling and learn how to function within the new parameters of the rules.
Well, and Sean Payton actually at one point in practice earlier this morning, he actually had one of those moments with one of the officials where he walked over, and I couldn't hear it completely, but I could hear a little bit of the conversation. And a lot of it was, all right, what happened? Right? Like he was like, tell me what it is that you saw that made the flag so that I can make sure that so that I can talk to my guys and be able to teach them to be able to avoid it. So that was one of the things that Sean Payton talked about. The other thing he talked about, if you're planning on going to practice tomorrow, tomorrow's scrimmage day. And it will be an immense amount of situational setup. When I said that Sean Payton spent a lot of time at the podium today, I mean it. He spent
nearly a half hour.
He spent a long time at the podium. But he also spent about 7 or 8 minutes basically breaking down what is going to happen tomorrow. He talked about the different phases that they're going to do in terms of situational. They're going to do some punting. They're going to do some in terms of where the team winds up starting. They're going to do some things like, hey, we're going to start at the 25, and then we're going to move over here, and then we're going to move over here, and then we're going to do some 2-minute offense, which they did today, which was fascinating. We can talk about that in a minute. But he talked to everything that's going to happen in the scrimmage tomorrow. So if you're going to practice tomorrow, you're going to get a lot of action.
Well, and especially on days when the practice might not have been as crisp, robust as you'd like. The coaches tend on a day where you weren't very good, they tend to go a little harder the next day, get your focus back. So I think tomorrow we will probably see a few sparks. We will probably see a lot of action and maybe even some short tempers as the defense this week has gotten the best. Defense gotten the best of the offense, and that's part of this equation, including a really good interception, and again practice, but an impressive interception that was returned for the touchdown in 7-on-7 by new addition Talanoa Hufanga.
Oh yeah,
as Nate would like to remind everybody, his high school classmate, but high school
I'm way too old.
Mate. Let's say.
Yes, I'm way too old. We are fellow Crescent Valley High School Raider alumni.
Represent.
In Corvallis, Oregon.
What was the mascot?
The Raiders.
Raiders, okay.
So part of the reason I wanted to talk about it was I'm going to actually use Sean Payton's word that he used at the podium. I'm going to use the word that he used at the podium. It was sick. It was absolutely spectacular, because when that ball left Bo's hand, Hufanga was like 8 yards away.
Yeah.
And he made a cut, an instinctual cut, and Sean Payton talked about Hufanga's instincts. He made a cut for that ball and brought it down. And if it had been a regular season, preseason, whatever game, see ya, pick six. It was spectacular. It was exactly why, if you go back into 2021, when Talanoa Hufanga was drafted in the 5th round by San Francisco, John Lynch, who, we could argue, knows a little something about safety.
Just a bit.
Said, the quote from John Lynch was, "The fun starts when he starts to play."
Mm-hmm.
That was what John Lynch had to say about Hufanga when he came out of USC, is basically this recognition of a guy that just loves to be out there and to play, but the instincts, and we've talked about that with Justin Simmons.
Mm-hmm.
We've talked about it. I think Pat Surtain has those instincts as well. Hufanga has them. He has this, like, the moment that ball, if he sees it, he's going to go and take it. Now, Sean Payton was heaping praise on him in part because of that play, but also talked about those instincts, talked about his ability to be a hard hitter. But we're still talking, Sean, about a guy that only played 17 games over the course of the last 2 seasons.
Right.
Because of
injury concerns are obviously, anytime you had someone that's had an injury history, and I talked about this yesterday with Cody Rourke, you can't totally predict injuries, but the most consistent predictor of injuries are the fact that you have one in the past. Because obviously, if you've had surgically repaired or whatever, it is vulnerable to get hurt again. It's one of the reasons that Dre Greenlaw is down with a quad injury. Said it's a different part than the injury that kept him out of OTAs. He will travel with the team to San Francisco at this stage, but don't be surprised if I don't expect him to play in the preseason game. And quite frankly, I don't expect him to play in those scrimmage days against the 49ers. I think they want to protect him that way. And you do worry about injury. And when you talk about Greenlaw, Hufanga, and addition Evan Ingram, tight end, these are guys that have injury histories, and it's part of the reasons that they were available in free agency.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the Niners have other parts of that, but it is part of it. It is a concern. But give Hufanga credit, the pairing of him and Brandon Jones, another guy with injury history that the Broncos were able to grab in part because of that away from Miami. There's always the concern there. And now Riley Moss has a history of his own. So you look at it and go, wow, Pat Surtain and Riley Moss on the outside, Brandon Jones and Talanoa Hufanga. Who's going to beat these guys? Well, over the course of the NFL season, you have to be aware of that. And that's why depth is going to be important. It's one of the reasons they grabbed John A. Barron. But when you talk about the pick and the instinctiveness, give a little bit of credit to Vance Joseph's defensive scheme, which encourages his players to leverage those instincts, and go ahead and take a chance, go gamble, go get the ball. Not every defensive player wants that. The defense under Joseph is aggressive. It's aggressive getting after the quarterback. It's aggressive getting after the ball. And more than anything, getting those interceptions, because fumbles are basically random for the most part. You can try to carve them out, but yeah, they're basically random. Interceptions, however, you'd like to get more. The Broncos finished tied for 9th in the league in interceptions with 15, but you could move up pretty quickly because second in the league was the Texans, and they had 19. Yeah. So if the Broncos can just get a handful of picks, average maybe one a game, that's a big difference maker, not only for the defense, but it also makes things easier for that offense that's having trouble getting on track.
Yeah. So when you talk about the defensive setup in the secondary that you just broke down, when you're talking about Hufanga and Jones, and we're talking about Barron and Moss and of course PS2, the secondary is there. And so what I wanted to transition to, in aside from the fact that I just really thought, I mean, Hufanga's pick was so beautiful, y'all, because of how he broke on the ball. The flip side to that is people are going to say, well, wait a minute, that means that Bo Nix put it where he shouldn't have, right? There was a follow-up question that wound up happening with Payton on the podium today about this idea of Bo sort of taking some chances, maybe having confidence in throws. Like, does he have too much confidence in a particular throw? Does he have too much confidence in being able to hit a particular receiver on a particular play? And Sean Payton kind of skirted around that particular question, but what he did say was, and he said it with kind of a smirk on his face, he said, I don't have a problem with him exploring what he's doing with the ball. That was actually the word he used, exploring.
Sounds like it's Rick Rubin making a record with somebody. Like, yeah. Explore the space.
Yes.
Let's get it right.
Like, I need more cowbell. But what's interesting there is, I think, again, the fact, and you can't overstate this. We talked about it with Peyton Manning when he was on this team as well. There is something to be said about having your offense go up against the best defense in the NFL. Because, yeah, you're going to F up from time to time. You're going to throw a pick. Same thing with Pat. I mean, Pat had one too. So that's going to happen in practice, and that's going to happen in some of these situations. But that's also part of Bo Nix's learning curve.
Yes.
Okay, great. Look at what happened when a guy that has those kinds of ball hawk instincts, like a Hufanga or like a Pat Surtain, are able to pick you off in practice, are able to make that kind of a play in 7-on-7. Okay, that happened. Does that resonate? Does that wind up being this point of reference in Bo's mind when you're taking on Houston, when you're you know what I mean? When you're playing these teams out here on the schedule? And in fact, Sean Payton made reference at the podium to a throw that Russell Wilson made against the Texans a couple of years ago, basically saying, like, it wasn't necessarily that the play wasn't there. It's that the defender made a really good play, and you just have to be aware of that. You've got to think about where the corner is. You got to think about where these guys are cutting on the ball. And he talked about that. So putting all of that together, you have this insane play that Hufanga made. I think he's going to make those kinds of plays when we get into the season as well. But then Sean Payton kind of flipped that conversation and brought it back to Bo and the decision that Bo made that turned into what would have been a pick six.
And this is one of the reasons that I constantly tell you, camp after camp, don't pay attention to people who are keeping camp stats, okay? Because there's a myriad of reasons why you shouldn't do it. And one of them, of course, the defense knows what play the offense is running. But nevertheless, there are things not to be concerned about. I was talking about this in our tent with Miley Sports Razor Strand. We talked about the idea that Bo Nix making some mistakes here is actually good. I want to see Bo Nix throw a couple interceptions, because if he's going to improve from year 1 to year 2, what do you have to do? You have to extend yourself slightly out of the comfort zone, right? And you don't know where the limits are until you exceed them, whether that's arm strength, whether that's the window you can put it in, whether it's working with certain receivers. You have to experiment with that and find out where it is. So when he's pushing maybe too far, and maybe when they go back and look at it, say, hey, that was the wrong place to put it. It leaves you too vulnerable to safeties who might be able to come by and guys that are ball hawks, and you have to learn that. Yeah. But that's the way you learn it. Learn it now while the lessons are cheap and easy and don't cost you games. So if Bo Nix was perfect all training camp, that makes me think he's not pushing hard enough. He's not trying hard enough. You have to find a way to go past what you did. And to do that, you have to run into those limits. And occasionally the bad things have to happen.
And remember, the other thing that Bo, and I'm speaking of Bo for a second, the other thing that he has the ability to do when these mistakes are made right now is at some point to be able to go over to Talanoa Hufanga and say, what did you see?
Right.
Like, did I give you a tell? Did I give you something that told you what I was
your
about?
Pitches somewhere, it happens.
You're not going to do that. Like, you're not going to play the Titans and go over and go, hey man, what happened there? Like, how did that happen? You can't do that. But you can do that in a conversation with Hufanga. You can do that with a conversation with Surtain. You can do that in a conversation with Nick Benito, who jumps the timing of a snap.
Right.
And you're able to say, all right, what did I do? Did I do something in my inflection in my voice? Did I have a tell? For those of you that play poker, was there a tell that gave you the indication of what was about to happen? Because that is also really valuable. Right towards the end of practice, I watched Riley Moss and Cortland Sutton were walking together and having a conversation. And obviously I couldn't hear them. They were probably 50 yards away from me. But between Riley and Court, you could see Court was like pulling on Riley's jersey, and then he was showing him over here, and then Riley like had his hands on his shoulder pads at one point. You could see they were having this discussion about how to, like, okay, where's the line of the defensive holding or the pass
interference? Especially when you have the refs out there that day.
Exactly. So those are the conversations that can happen right now that benefit these guys, and you're having that conversation with, again, arguably the best defense in the NFL. And those guys are able to say, hey, Court, here's what happened, or hey, Bo, here's what happened, and why I was able to do the play that I did.
And oftentimes it's more complicated than you think. Look, we don't have the film on the play that ended up with Hufanga's pick, but is it possible that maybe Bo didn't do anything wrong? Maybe there was supposed to be a pick. Maybe there was supposed to be a rub at a certain depth. 100%. It didn't hit at the right depth. That freed up Hufanga, and then he's able to be instinctive about it. It's more complicated than just as simple as like Bo Nix threw a bad pass and Hufanga picked it up. Sometimes it's that simple, but it's not always that simple. And that's kind of why when you have a chance to go against the defense, it's a good thing. And they'll get at it tomorrow. We'll expect more from the offense. We know what the defense is capable of. And I think we'll get it because you come back hungry after you have a bad day.
But I will say, again, folks, and I'm sorry to it sounds like I'm rooting for my guy, right?
It's okay to say you're rooting for your guy.
It was a gorgeous interception. It would have been the sort of thing that in a regular season game would have been a highlight that every network would have been talking about, because again, he is 8 yards away and just makes the perfect cut and closes the distance to be able to grab it. And like I said, it would have been a pick six in a game. Those are the kinds of things that this defense brings, and they have the ability to teach the other guys that are on the field how to be able to avoid that happening to them. That way, the defense is doing it to the Titans, and they're doing it to the Cowboys, and they're doing it to all that. So speaking of the Cowboys, Sean,
I was about to say, how'd you like to be the defending champion Philadelphia Eagles right now, as the teams around you in your division,
everybody in your division is falling apart?
Self-inflicted wounds. Terry McLaurin, of course, demanded a trade
Terry's
yesterday.
Like, I'm out of here.
A guy that, if you go look at the percentage of targets in the red zone for Washington, totally irreplaceable.
On a team that was one game away from the Super Bowl.
Right, against your division rival, no less. And on top of that, if you lose McLaurin, not only do you lose an ace receiver, but you also obviously hurt the growth of Jaden Daniels. The one thing, if you're Washington, you absolutely can't do. And now they're in that position. And now the Cowboys, not a lot of probably sympathy at this show for about that, but the Cowboys, Micah Parsons made it very clear he wants a trade from the Cowboys, saying he delivered his request to Stephen Jones personally. Might have had to do with Jerry Jones not learning his name yet, despite being maybe the most disruptive defensive player in the league. So now Micah Parsons wants out, and his quote, "I no longer want to be here."
Yes.
And I mean, there's got to be, and the Giants are still the Giants. I mean, if you are the Eagles, you have just got to be sitting there, just laughing at the ridiculousness of the rest of your division. And one thing I've talked about with our producer, Danny Bailey, too, at this point, and obviously camp rosters will change. The Eagles, the defending champs, are the league's youngest team.
Yes.
So if you're thinking dynasty loading, believe me, the Eagles are thinking about it too.
Well, and right now, I mean, you just took away the team that they had to beat in the NFC Championship. If that happens with McLaurin, and he does wind up being gone, maybe Jaden Daniels is able to
work something out. Debo Samuel,
maybe something goes on. I don't know, but I have absolutely zero sympathy for Dallas. A, because I'm not a fan, and B, because most of what tends to happen that is a problem in Dallas is self-inflicted by Jerry Jones.
Yep.
And so I don't feel sorry for him. He has convinced himself that he is the smartest football mind in the world. And he refuses to just hand over the team and general manager positions to his son, Steven, and or to let Steven run the team and bring in a GM of his own.
Worth noting, Parsons said he gave the request to Steven Jones.
He didn't even want to talk to Jerry.
Nope.
The NFC East is a mess. Outside of the Eagles, outside of the Eagles. But the beauty in that is, guess what NFC division the Broncos are facing this year?
Yep.
The NFC East.
That's handy.
So Cowboys, that works great. The Cowboys, the Eagles, the Commanders. You're sitting here in an NFC East where it's just going to be like, oh, well, this is fun.
And then
by the way, you get the Giants, who are, they're not bad, but they're basically a mess.
The Chiefs and the Chargers, of course, get those teams too, as do the Raiders.
Of course.
And they will probably chew them up too. But the funny thing is, that's one of those situations where, okay, right, you get it. You're always in competition with your division rivals. But we've talked about this. The AFC right now is historically stacked.
Yes.
And so if your division has, even if it's all of you, if your division has a couple teams now that look like real big challenges that maybe they aren't, then you get 2 extra wins on the schedule. It may not get the Broncos any closer to the AFC West title, but it does get them closer to the wild card because other teams don't have that.
Yeah, they're helped out by, and again, it's something we've talked about quite a few times. You're talking about a team that, despite 10 wins and all of that, is playing a lighter division schedule this year because of where they finished in the standings.
Yep.
And so
one advantage of finishing third.
They're benefited by that. They're benefited by the idea of being able to not quite be at that level where they're playing in terms of strength of schedule, win-loss, et cetera, that they're running into any kind of a problem. 2 things I'll bring up here, and then I know Troy Renck's going to join us. So is Drew Creasman. 2 quick things. First and foremost, Sean, when you and I got here, the Cubs game was on. And I loved it. This is the first home game since Ryan Sandberg passed away.
Going with baby blues that Sandberg liked today. Yeah.
Yep. They wore those jerseys. You even joked. You said, is that the Expos? Oh, wait.
Like it a bit.
Because it did kind of look like the Expos jerseys. But because Troy's coming on, I wanted to say that because Troy and I were talking earlier this week, and when you are of our age,
watched him turn a lot of double plays on WGN.
Well, yeah, I was going to say what happened was, if you are of our age when cable television was starting up, you had WGN and you had WTBS. And so a lot of us growing up from a sports standpoint, outside of our own local teams, we were watching the Atlanta Braves and we were watching the Chicago Cubs because that's what we were given as we started to experience cable television in our homes and get exposed to some of these teams that were from other parts of the country. And so I remember watching Sandberg. I remember watching the players from Chicago and the players from Atlanta, and so it was really, there was a lot that they did. They put his number on the field right behind home plate. I'm sure that will be there throughout the weekend as they celebrate Ryan Sandberg. But I just wanted to toss that out there. It was a really cool thing that the Cubs did, and whether you're a Cubs fan or not, it's hard to argue about the impact that Sandberg had on that organization and just being a guy that was easy to root for in baseball. Yeah. I mean, he really was by all accounts. So that was there. The last thing I want to remind you is it is a Friday, and yes, you can come down and join us here at Downhill, but I also want to remind you that our friends at Hooters have their happy hour every single Monday through Friday from 3 until 6. You can go to HootersColorado.com. You're going to find out all their events, their specials, all those kinds of things, because they have different things, different days of the week. But that happy hour is every single Monday through Friday from 3 to 6, and it includes things like discounted shots on stuff like Jameson or Patron. They've also got discounted appetizers for you, so you can turn it into a little after work relaxation on a Friday or a Monday or pick a day on the calendar, whatever you want. But you could also sit there, you can have a little snack, you can kick back, and obviously you got the great views of the world famous Hooters girls. Again, HootersColorado.com is the website that will not only give you the location that is closest to you, but it'll get you the whole list of everything they've got on their events schedule. Troy Renck from the Denver Post joins this guy next.
When I go to court, these aren't my clients, these are my friends. These are people that I believe in, and they have one shot, just one shot for justice. If they've come to me and we've gotten to trial, their life has been turned upside down in some awful way. And I am their only hope. I need to be their champion, to quote Prince Oberyn from Game of Thrones. They need someone in this trial by combat that can fight for them. I'm all they have. So if I haven't put the time in, if I haven't trained, if I haven't humbly looked in the mirror and thought about ways I can be better. I don't present my best self in court, then I failed them. And that's what motivates me as a trial lawyer, because when this is over, that client goes home. And if I haven't done my best for him, I haven't been his champion, then I've failed.
Always delighted to get a chance to visit with our next guest from this. To the Broncos podcast with Troy Renck. Delighted to have part of the Miles. This is Troy Renck and Troy. The Broncos will be getting into more of these scrimmage mode tomorrow. A little underwhelming for the office day. It's been that way all camp. Obviously, the Broncos have top 5 defense. Rating. It's always difficult for the offense to get good. But after a lighter day yesterday and today, a day was going. I expect Saturday to have a lot of fireworks when
Yeah, listen, today Sean Payton was not having it. It was a practice about teaching, a practice about details. He was getting after it with certain guys, and he had a 33-minute press conference afterward, which was interesting because sometimes when things go poorly, that's when he's more available to the media. I told you this, Sean, that the worse things get, the better he is with the media. So, but yeah, they've tried to pace it where everyone has talked about the value of that third day in pads, that it was the best practice they've had this camp. Adam Troutman said it was the best practice they've had in 3 years that he's been with the team. And now it's the old, stacking days. How do you build on it? Because when you're a team that has big expectations, the small things matter. And how do you keep that attention to detail as you now start getting into the slug and the slog of August? Usually the game being next week, that helps change the environment. You're going to have a day of practice against the Niners next week. But this is an important time for this team because they're not the Chiefs. They're not the Bills. They're not the Ravens. And this is a time for them to make up ground. This is Sean Payton talks about the race that starts with the regular season. And that first month of the season in some ways feels like preseason. Which teams can get off to a hot start? The Payton Broncos have never done that in his first 2 years. So these practices matter. And that's why I think you saw the way he reacted today.
There's obviously advantages of playing against and practicing against guys. A really good defense the Broncos have. Talked about that just a couple minutes ago. But at the same time, there can be a dynamic when you keep smacking your head against a brick wall. Sean Payton talked about it early in practice when they hadn't got pads on. That sometimes it can be difficult to evaluate what things are going right, what things are going wrong, when you know that things are lopsided at the moment in terms of the defense. So even though you have a play that might not have a big result, you may go back and look at it and say, hey, you know what? I was actually performing well. Our defense is good and they stopped it. So if you're the coaching staff and if you're a member of the model, how do you disassemble that so you don't lose confidence in what you're doing on the offensive side, especially for young?
Yeah, it's difficult. And I've covered this team since 2014. And, when they had Peyton Manning, the offense used to win a lot more during training camp. Yeah. The defense wasn't very good one of those years in 14 specifically, but they used to win a lot more. And the defense for the better part of the last 9 years has won most of the training camp practices. And so how do you keep from being demoralized? Sometimes, Sean, the way they do it is start putting the twos versus the ones defensively to get the one offense going and get some confidence. We'll see if that happens. Sean Payton is typically a guy who likes to have ones versus ones, best on best. I do think you're going to see some of that changed a little bit. But how do you keep – the hardest thing in sports is to have confidence without results. So it's difficult to go into a meeting and say, yes, we know you had an interception there, or we know this time, but that wouldn't happen in a game because of, or they knew it was coming. So if we continue to see a trend where the defense dominates, it would not surprise me to see him tweak it where the number 2 defense goes against the 1 offense and vice versa. And that's not that uncommon, frankly.
No.
But this defense is so good. You saw Hufanga make a play today that we haven't seen around here in a long time. Instinctually jump out and make a play on an interception of Nick's. Pat Surtain had a breakup interception of Nick's that may or may not have been interference. It's going to make the offense better, but to your point, you don't want to it's the old coaching sandwich. Like, you yell at instruction, you tell them how good they are, and then you yell again. Like, you can't have it just be yelling. You're terrible, because eventually you start to believe it. So it wouldn't surprise me, Sean, if you see him tweak it a little bit where the 2s go against the 1 just to get them going. But again, the other way is don't tell them what you're doing. And that's part of the issue is a lot of times the defense knows it's a run only. There's no chance at a pass, so they don't have to worry about anything else. So they make a play, so they're kind of cheating in that way. It's not their fault. It's just the way the drill is designed.
Yeah, and going forward into next week, we're talking about the situation of travel. And breaking the things up is good, right? It's not. But when you look at the offense as it goes, let's say tomorrow they're doing the scrimmage right, what they'll be doing. How do you define success? What does it look like? Some Rockies kind of push the envelope. They try to do a little bit more than he did last year, and not getting good results against this team. It would work. But what would be the signs? What would you see in practice that might let you go, okay, this is rounding it this one?
Well, for me, it's just going to be more balance on offense, and that's what's hard about camp because they're not really tackling. If they run the ball more effectively, you're going to see a different version of Bo Nix on bootlegs and on play action that we didn't see consistently last year because they didn't run the ball well on first down. It led Nix to pass more on first down, I believe, than any quarterback in the NFL. He was certainly top 5 in dropbacks all year. Like, he threw the ball too much. So what would indicate to me that things are going well? And again, part of the thing, we're not seeing Bo Nix scramble a lot in training camp. One of his biggest weapons is his legs. So that's one of the issues you have to watch. Like, sometimes when a play breaks down, he would get loose, and he's not really doing that now. That's not how it's designed. But for me, success, even if it's 8 series in the preseason and a practice against the Niners and a practice against the Cardinals, success is going to be in balance. That we're seeing 3rd and 4, 3rd and 2, 3rd and 1 more consistently, because we will not see balance if it's 3rd and 8. That is just a difficult position to be in, and it's a horrible position to be in against their current defense that they go against in practice. But if they're balanced and they're 3rd and 4 and less more frequently, that's when I will say this offense is about to become really explosive and turn the corner.
And that obviously does indicate the run is part of it. Obviously, you have J.K. Dobbins, you have R.J. Harvey. The rest of it's going to be interesting. How many backs can they realistically carry? You still have Tyler Bidet, you have Blake Watson, you have Audric Estime, you have Leo McLaughlin, who spoke to the media after practice. Presumably, Michael Burton's got a role in there as well. So when we look at the depth there, we've seen Audric Estime stack some days, right? How impactful is that really? Does the preseason matter more when you're talking about a competition, say, between, hypothetically, McLaughlin and Estime, or Estime and Bidet for maybe the final spot?
Everything matters, but the games matter more for guys that are, 3rd, 4th, 5th. Like, you're trying to take the 3rd guy, the 4th guy, the 5th guy. The games matter more. You have to show out, and Sean Payton pays attention to that. It's how Jaleel McLaughlin made the team a couple years ago. He just went off against San Francisco in that road game where you're like, okay, he's never going to make the practice squad. He just had 100 and some yards rushing, and every NFL team will notice that. And so the games matter more for Estime. The games matter more for Bidet. Here's my guess. They're going to go with 4 running backs, and Burton will get passed through waivers. Because 4 or 5 teams don't carry fullbacks anymore, just like they did last year. So my guess is they manipulate it. With Sean Payton and George Payton have become really adept at manipulating the practice squad and using that almost like a 54th and 55 man on the roster. But my guess is that's a way to keep Estime or Bidet. I don't see Blake Watson making it as of right now. So McLaughlin makes it as the 3rd, and then it's going to be between Estime and Bidet. And whoever's better in those games makes it, and the other one maybe goes to practice squad, maybe doesn't, and then Burton gets cut, goes to the practice squad, and then you just start elevating him again during the season.
Yeah. When you look at McLaughlin's role, like I said, he had a chance to talk to the media, but as the season went along, Marvin Mims started subsuming a lot of that. He started being on field. He was in the backfield more often, quite effective out of there. We know the Broncos want to find ways to get Mims the ball and get him into space, probably not lining up opposite Cortland Sutton and running routes. That way they're going to be creative. Is there a possibility that if they look, because special teams is obviously a defining thing, are we Are we jumping the gun a little bit? Because I'm with you. My assumption is Jaleel McLaughlin makes this team. But given that Marvin Mims kind of took his job at times at the end of the year, are we maybe going off an assumption there that could be faulty?
Perhaps, but in listening to Mims yesterday, he talked about, or 2 days ago, I believe it was now, that, yeah, he loves getting those chances, but he's not crazy about getting hit by linebackers. I don't think he's going to run the ball as much as we think. I think, again, I said on my podcast today that, he needs to get 5 to 8 targets / touches, to be effective. And around 8 would be better. But so is that 5, 4 or 5 passes his direction and 2 carries? That's excluding the punt return, kick return thing, just on offense. So is that 6 passes in his direction and 2 runs? I just don't think he's going to run. It's not going to grow. You saw this even with Deebo Samuel. He had an amazing year. And then a couple years later, he was barely running. It's because you get hurt. Yeah. The receivers now, Deebo's built more like R.J. Harvey.
Yeah, Deebo's
huge, and he's
big,
got a trunk to him. Mims doesn't, and so that's why it's more of a gadget thing with Mims. Where let's say in 17 games he ends up with 24 rushes, 30 rushes. So I don't think that would preclude McLaughlin from making the team. And McLaughlin's ability to play special teams, be a gunner on special teams. Darren Rizzi loves fast guys. He plays special teams, complete red line, full throttle. That's why I believe McLaughlin's got a clear path to making this team that's separate of whatever Mims's role would end up being.
Last one for you, Troy. He's talked about it before. There's been all this talk in the offseason about the Joker when obviously Sean Payton talked about it. His very first attempt to talk to the press, Evan Ingram tried to basically tamp it down and say, like, look, I'm playing tight end. It's not a position. It's not that sort of thing. But today he refined it and said specifically, it was asked about the Joker. He said, tight ends and running backs that are rare receivers. Okay. So, and called out guys like Travis Kelce, called out other players around the league. In other words, like the guys that defensive coordinators plan for and keep up at night. So can we stop this? We already have a Joker. He wears number 15. He's the best basketball player on earth in Denver. Can we stop with this Joker thing? Because as our producer Danny Bailey and I talked about a couple of days ago, if everyone's a Joker, then nobody's a Joker.
That's how I feel like Clear at the airport sometimes at DIA.
Yeah, exactly.
Everyone has Clear. Nobody has Clear.
Right.
The Joker, like I covered Shannon Sharp at the height of his power. It's just a mismatch. It's all it is. The Joker's another word synonymous for he's a mismatch in space. Like I used to say, when he was right, he's showing me in Cleveland now, but Jerry Jeudy's better in space than NASA. That's what this role is. It's that you're tight end versus a linebacker, you're running back versus safety, your guy's going to win. So it's just Joker for me is just synonymous with a mismatch in space. That could be a swing pass. That could be a bubble screen. That could be a wheel route. It's that guy that they have trouble when it gets a one-on-one against this offensive player in space. The offensive guy generally wins. So that's all it is. Kelce's different because he's just so nuanced at the top of routes. They have wonder twin powers, he and Mahomes. But the problem was when Ingram signed, he leaned into the Joker with the tweet, with the Joker. So it made it fun, and he gets it. But the reason we all are kind of over it is there is only one Joker. It's Nikola Jokic. If he doesn't retire to become the greatest harness racing horse owner of all time, it's him. So when he leaves, and if Sean Payton's still here, we can go all in and lean back into the Joker. For now, I'm with you, Sean. Just say it's a mismatch guy. It's flat on stripes. It's a mismatch. And that's all it is. It's a running back who can win against the linebacker and safety. It's a tight end who's going to win against the linebacker and safety. It's that simple. And Ingram can do that. McLaughlin does some of that. Certainly we want to see Dobbins do some of that. Anything to give this offense more balance and the ability to win in the middle of the field.
Yeah, it's starting to feel a little bit like Fetch from Mean Girls. I'm like, okay, we're trying a little hard to make this happen now. We can move on. It's a mismatch. Exactly right. Troy Renck, thanks so much for the time. Make sure you check out the latest podcast, the Broncos podcast with Troy Renck, and everything that he's putting together at the Denver Post. Thanks, Troy. I appreciate it.
You got it, Sean. Take care. Have a great rest of the show.
Thanks so much. Of course, it is the weekend, and maybe you're thinking a little bit about getting out on the golf course. I mean, I don't blame you. Why not? Where is it better to play in Colorado except get out on a golf course on the weekends? We have your spot. Denver Golf, 8 distinct courses. Of course, since it's right here in Colorado, guess what you get? Mountain courses, urban courses, suburban courses, everything in between. Your style of play, the thing you want to do, Denver Golf has it. And all these courses, of course, are public. They've been renewed, they've been refreshed, and friendly customer service. And most importantly, in the golf world, reasonable prices, all at Denver Golf. So make Denver Golf your next place to go play 18. Visit cityofdenvergolf.com to set your tee time. That's cityofdenvergolf.com. Come home to play. Denver Golf is your neighborhood course.
With millions of page views every year, ColoradoPreps.com is the #1 source for the high school sports community to keep up with the latest news and scores. From football and volleyball to basketball and softball, ColoradoPreps.com provides a year-round hub for coaches, friends, and family to stay connected to their favorite schools and athletes, and keep an eye on their rivals. Covering high school sports from the peaks to the plains, you always get the latest at ColoradoPreps.com.
Of course, the MLB trade deadline came and went yesterday, so we have an opportunity to talk to our lead writer covering the Rockies and the host of the 20th of Blake podcast, Drew Creasman. Drew, thanks for joining us. The Rockies did make a move yesterday. They moved Jake Bird. They moved Tyler Kinley before that, and Ryan McMahon before that. Bird and McMahon both go to the Yankees. The return in prospects, a little, I will say, it's not really a really great baseball scouting term. Meh. A pretty average return for what you got. You got a handful of prospects, some of which will probably never reach the Rockies, which tells me that some of these talents should have been traded before rather than later. In Jake Bird's case, obviously, early going into the season, playing really, really well. And in the last 17 appearances or so, double-digit ERA, probably knocked down the return you could get for the Yankees. But for the Rockies, who usually never really make trades, even if it's guys that have been with them for short term,
right,
this trade deadline with a couple guys moving out, specifically McMahon, really felt as if the Rockies did come to an understanding that some of these guys on the wrong side of 30, by the time the Rockies are hopefully good again, they're not going to help us. We just need more guys in our farm system and to see if someone can bubble up.
Yeah. I mean, you're right. There's only so much, most people do wait till the deadline to make those trades. So it can be tougher doing, those moves in the first couple months of a season, trying to take advantage of a hot reliever who's been up and down throughout his career. GMs don't always fall for that. It'd have been nice for sure. He definitely dropped off there, but overall, I really like the package of prospects they got back. It's mostly pitching. It's mostly guys who played in college, who, if they're going to make it or not, we're going to find out sooner rather than later. And I'm very intrigued by this second baseman they snagged out of the Yankees system there, Rock Reggio. What a great name for a potential future Rocky. And a lefty power bat, which is something that they really needed in their system. The guy's got 18 homers in 60 games so far between high A, and then the Yankees moved him up to double A this season. So MLB Pipeline has the lefty pitcher that they got back for Ryan McMahon, ranked 5th in the Rockies system not among pitchers, among all players in the Rockies system, which is getting better and better, and has players like Charlie Condon, and Ethan Holiday isn't ranked yet, but right. Beyond that, it's so. And then this Rock Reggio kid, I think they had in there at 11th. The other guys, a little bit more of flyers, maybe future relievers. You're going to find out what you've got with them. One is a great story, undrafted guy who's just putting up ridiculous numbers in double A, and you'll find out, he's 26, but he's only been in the pros for 2 years. So he was an independent guy. Like, he may be one of those guys that pops. That's the kind of guy you should be taking a flyer on when you're a team like the Rockies. So yeah, there's no individual player where you go, oh, they got so-and-so's top prospect or this. I'm not sure that was ever really on the table for what they had. you know, to trade out there. But I do think, you know, in terms of what they did, you can always look around and say maybe they could have moved this guy or that guy. They moved their position player that had the most value. They moved their pitcher that had the most value. In return, they got 4 prospects. The pipeline all ranks in their top 30. That's, you know, if nothing else, what you're supposed to do, right? And so that, yeah, you know, now we just see if any one of those guys hits, you look back and you go, great trade deadline. If none of them hit, you go, they got nothing for some guys who were pretty fun to watch for a little while in McMahon and Bird, if nothing else.
Yeah, but in the cases of Bird and Kinley, especially, you're right. These are guys you added as veteran arms, and they were there to provide depth, not immediately close or play major roles. And if you turn them into something that at least gets to the major leagues at some point, and maybe it's Riggio, even though he generates a lot of power despite a pretty small frame, 5'9", 180, kind of an overachiever, and sometimes those guys are late bloomers, and sometimes they stall out. Sometimes that power doesn't play at higher levels, and we'll see. But I do think the Rockies did the right thing, and there haven't been too many times in the last few years where I could say that.
What a sentence you just said!
Right. So I know it feels like I should be timestamping and going, wait a minute. On August 1st, I said the Rockies did the right things, and obviously we know this season. Look, they're 28-80, which means if you're an optimist, they can still finish with a winning record. They just have to win all of their games. But
win out. Just win out.
Yeah, I just went out. Fine. You have to have not only Rocktober, but Rocktember and Rockust. I don't even know that word. Obviously isn't happening. This team is in the cellar and it's staying there. But now, given the post-trade deadline, now teams start looking a little bit towards their youth. We've separated the teams that are contenders from the pretenders. We've seen all the prospects move around. We know the Rockies are in the ladder. So what do you think over the next let's just say 2-3 weeks, a month of August? What do you expect to see? Do you expect to see any significant debuts, or are the Rockies just going to keep on keeping on and let their younger players keep working things out at the major league level?
No, I think we're going to see a couple more debuts. We're going to see a few other guys come back. In fact, we've got a chance for a pretty great story. And that whenever Dugan Darnell just got called up, I was just telling you about Ben Shields. Not sure I said his name a moment ago. The lefty they got from the Yankees, undrafted free agent. Same thing with this guy Dugan Darnell, who again has just done nothing but pitch incredibly well in the minors. And at some point you go, try it at the show. He's going to get a chance to make his major league debut, maybe tonight, but whenever he does come out. So we're going to see that. I think Kyle Karros, we've talked a bit about him. Boy, could his dad hit. And so far in the minor leagues, that's all he's done is just hit the baseball. Oh, actually, that's not all he's done. He also won a Gold Glove award at one point at third base as a 6'5" slugger, and maybe more of a doubles guy when he gets to the bigs. But again, we're all going to find out together. I think we'll see Chase Dollander and Zach Veen both come back. Zach Veen in particular has really made the most of his time in AAA. Yeah. Dollander, that's got to be see what's best for him. And if he's doing well, maybe you give him an outing or two at the end of the season. But Zach Veen, we're going to see again before the end of the season. So I think there's going to be a bit more. There's always going to be those guys in the bullpen. Wellington Herrera is a name to remember, to be on the lookout for, another debut probably. But yeah, I mean, it's going to be interesting to watch them mostly throw out a very, very young lineup. Until Karros arrives, you're probably still stuck with Kyle Farmer and or Orlando Arcia at third base. But beyond that, it's going to be kind of open tryouts for the rest of the season. Let's see what happens.
German Marquez is a free agent after the season. Antonio Senzatella still has another year on his deal, and Kyle Freeland has 2 more on his. But obviously this year, and some of that's been the hitting too, has been a disaster for all of these guys. You talk about Chase Dollander. He's got 2 wins as a starter, 2-9. That's not that far from the winner. Senzatella has 4. He leads them in wins among starters. Isn't it? That's amazing. And
it's amazing that Senzatella's given up more earned runs than he may be in second place now, but that he's the guy with 4 wins.
Oh, no. With an ERA of almost 7. And so now when you look at this scenario here, it does feel like you have in Marquez, this is probably the end of the road for the Rockies. So do you think they probably look at making some changes, even with guys like Senzatella and Freeland, knowing that these guys are on the books for next year? Do you continue to try to pitch them, work them out? Or if you have youth and you want to give them a crack, are you afraid of saying to Senzatella or Freeland or Marquez, like, hey, you know what? It's not happening. We're just shutting you down. We have to see some youth.
Yeah. I don't think that'll happen with Kyle Freeland for a bunch of very Kyle Freeland specific reasons.
Kyle Freeland / Rockies reasons, right? Yes.
Yeah, and I don't know if you saw the ball game the other night where he insisted on pitching while he was throwing up, and he was terrible. And again, it was like a perfect encapsulation of that both thing. Like someone's got to just tell him to take him out of the game, but right now he's the guy with the most tenure in the room. So you're just like, I don't know. He's just like, other than that, though, look, I love Antonio Senzatella.
I've said this. Really, I like the Bulldog mentality. I like
really
the person.
Good.
I like all of them. But the numbers aren't here this year, despite the fact he's leading the rotation in wins.
It just goes to show you how much that stat really means anything these days. Right. But I think Marquez, you can write it out with. He's been hurt lately too, so when he comes back, you see what he's got. Senzatella at some point, if you think you're ready to see what Sean Sullivan's got, you're ready to see what Gabriel Hughes has got, maybe even some of these other guys who aren't quite that high end. We've been seeing interesting things out of Bradley Blaylock. Look at his last 3 games. Guy's been untouchable. Tanner Gordon's been a lot more up and down, but that's at least more interesting than continuing to watch a guy now who just isn't getting it done, hasn't been now for a while. And I think it's just clear that the injuries have taken their toll. And that's a tough, sad, cold reality that you've got to come to and say, it's not working. Maybe you slot him into the bullpen if you feel like you want to be nice about it. Or if you feel like, well, frankly, it's not like your bullpen is full of incredible arms either. So you could probably
the 2 of them. So, right.
Right.
The point you make is interesting, Drew, because this is one of the things for the Rockies that if they're going to continue, I think, to do this the right way. When you're a team that's in contention, or at least even close to contention, you can't bring up those sort of fringy prospects where you figure this is guys that are 26 or whatever that are still there. And you're like, we have to eventually see if they can stick or not. Teams that are in contention can't take that risk because maybe it turns out he's still in AA or AAA at 26 for a reason and he's not majorly ready. And you're going to find that out the hard way, and it may cost you a couple games that might cost you a postseason berth. But for the Rockies, it feels like this is the opportunity to look at those guys, the guys that are like, well, we don't really know if they're major league ready. Why not give them a couple cracks at it? Because if they go out and perform poorly, you evaluated the player at the major league level. You were able, and the loss or the bad performances in the grand scheme of things, they don't cost you at all.
Right, exactly. See what you've got. The Diamondbacks did something, and I don't remember the exact timeline on this, so I don't want to overdo this parallel, but they went and grabbed Merrill Kelly, who was pitching in like Japan or Korea or something, right? And they're just like, I don't know, in a year, remember right before they went to the World Series, they lost 110 games. But one of the things they were doing while losing 110 games was finding out stuff like this, which I actually think sneakily the Rockies have been doing throughout the year. You've learned a lot about guys like Hunter Goodman and Jordan Beck. You've maybe also learned a lot about guys like Michael Toglia. That goes both ways, right? And so you go, okay, we're going to move Charlie Condon over to full-time first base because we are no longer sold that Michael Toglia is the guy of the future. And that's the same thing we're talking about here in the rotation. So at this point, even though I've never been the biggest believer that Tanner Gordon's going to be the guy, I think at best he's maybe again going to stick in the bullpen. Find that out now. Bradley Blaylock, is it just a 3-game hot streak? If he finishes the season the way he's pitched the last 3 games, you're putting him directly into the rotation next season. If he goes back to what he was before, you're back to where you were square one, thinking, okay, it's Sullivan, it's Hughes, it's Brody Brecht once he gets ready. He's been incredible in the minors his last few games. And so, those are the guys I'd like to see them continue to try out. I had almost completely forgotten about Warming Bernabel. I had, and then he comes up and you go, and I'm double checking his AAA numbers. Oh, he figured something out this year. See what he does. Comes up, he's hitting. Now again, is it a thing or not a thing? This is going to be my phrase, I guess, for the rest of the season. Let's all find out together. But at least we're finding out. At least Warming Bernabel is playing every day.
Yeah, and I guess that's the trick for the Rockies. For Rockies fans, we know this. We know the season is going to be a disaster. The question is, since that's a given, how do you find those opportunities, those little windows in which you can improve in the longer term? It's now becomes big picture stuff. We'll see if the Rockies are up to doing that in the rest of this season. But you want to follow Drew Creasman for all of the Rockies news, especially as those call-ups keep coming. You want to get the insight on those players. Nobody better to follow. And check out the 20th and Blake podcast while you're at it. Drew, always good talking to you. Thanks so much for the time.
Always appreciate you, Sean. Take care.
Thanks so much, Drew Creasman, joining us. And for the Rockies, we know they're not going anywhere. We know they're going to lose 100-plus games. They're going to lose way more than that. But obviously now you take a crack at some of these guys. Let them find out that the catch is to identify which of your prospects can be contributors and which ones can't. And every team has to deal with this. There's only one way to find out. You have to promote them, you have to play them, and you have to see. But for contending teams, they can't take that risk. The Rockies, who cares? You're finishing dead last anyway. You don't even worry about your draft position because the anti-tanking rules that Major League Baseball installed means the Rockies, no matter where they finish, they can lose out, and they will pick 10th next year. So there's no impact on trying these guys. The Rockies should be aggressive in checking out their prospects, giving them opportunities at the Major League level, and find out which guys could contribute, because the sooner you identify those players, the sooner you can actually start moving forward, fill needs in free agency or in the draft, and make sure you start building an actual franchise that can start doing something instead of spinning their wheels down at 20th and Blake. It's a long way to go, but at least the most recent steps are steps in the right direction. We appreciate everyone down here at Downhill Brewing letting us post up as we have after training camp every day this season. We, of course, will be back out there at training camp watching the scrimmage tomorrow. If you see us, go ahead and say hi, but we'll be back on Monday with more. Thanks to Drew Creasman. Thanks to Troy Renck of the Denver Post. Nate Lundy, of course, started the show off with us, but most of all, thanks to you. However you caught the show, if you're catching it live or if you're catching it on your time frame. That's why we do it the way we do, and we can't wait to get back at it Monday. So for all of us here at Mile High Sports, I'm Sean Drotar. Have a safe weekend, because we want to see you right back here on Monday for more Broncos on Mile High Sports Today.